Say good morning. Since today's Chav Zayin Adar, so just as a little Hagdama, and still all of you were born after Tavshin and Beis, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So a few months ago, I got an email from someone anonymous, for what I do Sunday night, my life Chassidus applied. So he writes to me, his parents are very distraught and they cry all the time why he doesn't miss the Rebbe. And he tells them, I never saw the Rebbe, so you could only miss something you saw. I also don't miss the Baal Shem Tov or the Alter Rebbe or the Frierdiker Rebbe. Not that he doesn't feel for the Rebbe, but he says, you miss something you had, then you miss it. And he says, what can I tell them? They start crying even more when I say that, because what did we do wrong? In other words, why didn't we make you feel like we feel, in other words? So it reminds me every time when I'm speaking to people who good Chassidus who were born afterwards, probably have a very different experience than those of us born living at Tzimtzum, so to speak. But yet, you grew up in these homes and these schools, yeshivas, in the kollel here. So as you know, my style is I don't like to just assume things. People, there's what the party line says and everybody just goes along. And then there's what we feel inside. It's not always the same. So I want to just share a few words on that note, personal words actually. So I, on the other hand, that was my prime time. Now I'm a middle-aged, elderly Jew. Then I was my 30s, and I was working the sichos, so it was like not just I was involved, I was in the heart of things. So Nun Beis, how old was I in Nun Beis? I would have been 35. So, and of course, every Shabbos there was a Farbrengen, and the weekdays the Rebbe was speaking almost every second day come out. In that Kufa, Nun Beis. But I go back, of course, I was working in sichos for many years before that. So my whole life orbited around the Rebbe speaking, basically. And then that Monday night, I remember I was sitting in my office, and upstairs in Anachas Atmimim, that complex building that some of you may have visited that nobody can figure out where's what. The building, over 770. It's two buildings. It's what they call it, like a labyrinth of complex. And I remember, actually, Rabbi Yossi Lu, who should have a complete refuah shleima, he was working then on Anachas with us. He comes, it was around maybe 8:30 at night, maybe 8, I don't remember exactly. And it was a good, probably an hour and a half after the Shkia. So the Rebbe did come at times back from the oil later. They did Mancha Ma'ariv, but this was maybe later than usual. And right away he said to me, what do you think? I right away felt it was just a hergish, that something was not normal. And then, of course, the news started trickling in that something happened, the Rebbe fell down. Nobody knew exactly what happened. And then a little while later, they built this like tent, not tent, like a plastic entryway. So the Rebbe's car pulled up, so the Rebbe would be taken without anyone seeing. They built it along the driveway outside of where the Rebbe's room is. The Rebbe would come downstairs through the Kapanim. The news didn't take long to figure out what's happening. It wasn't good news. And you can imagine that the whole, everything changed after that. I'm not going to go through all the ups and downs of that Kufa from Nun Beis to Nun Daled. But I will say this, that so for everybody, it was a major shock. People were thinking that it was impossible to imagine that the Rebbe would not Farbrengen next Shabbos. And everybody remembered Lamed Ches when the Rebbe had the heart attack. So in Chanami, there was a Helam for a while, but then the Rebbe came back stronger than ever. And the Rebbe spoke with Shabbos, and he spoke from his room, etc. I remember nobody even imagined it wouldn't be a Farbrengen. This was the second day after Vayakel was the Farbrengen that year, Vayakel. Next Shabbos would be Pekudei. So I was in the middle of working on the Sikha, actually, of Vayakel when this happened. Usually the Sikha would go into the Rebbe Tuesday, but that wouldn't happen that year, that week. Al Kaponim, things did not get better, let's put it this way. So the whole Lubavitch and everything went into a whole new state of confusion and all that came with that. But I don't want to talk about that right now, as I said. I want to talk about something else, more personal. So for me, besides the tragedy that we all experienced, was also I was out of a job. Not that anybody cared, but because my whole life, as I said, was a Farbrengen, and there was always a Farbrengen. I mean, in some years it wasn't every Shabbos, but it was more or less the Rebbe, the Rebbe was a Chai Lahachis, Chai Be'etzem. It was a Chai that constantly was like a live force. And here, the Rebbe's silence ultimately silenced my own work. I had nothing to write. I wasn't going to write my own Farbrengen. So I say it not because I'm not trying to focus on myself. I'm just using myself as an example of what happened there. And it took a while. I started thinking, like, what am I supposed to do with my life now? And again, this wasn't the big issue here, but personally, not only was it my life, it was my whole chayes. I was around. It was like the most exciting part of everything. Writing the Rebbe's Farbrengens and communicating with the Rebbe and the Rebbe answering and back and forth. You know, it was a whole vibrant experience. Then I reminded myself, I don't remember when it was. I mean, we had a meeting in our office, and we knew that the Rebbe's approach is you continue on, we're not stopping anything. So what we started doing is printing things from the previous years. You know, we always had something to do, but not the new Farbrengens. So then I remembered 6 weeks earlier that I was Zeicha actually to be the maniach to write that Farbrengen, the Farbrengen of Shabbos Pasha Boy, which includes Sikh of Gimel Shvat, Nun Beis, literally 6 weeks before the stroke, and the Rebbe spoke mamash about a stroke. And it was also odd at the time. No one understood why the Rebbe didn't suddenly start speaking a good 15, 20 minutes about the Frierdiker Rebbe having a stroke in Tafshin Gimel, Tafshin Dal, whenever it was, Tafshin Hey. And the Rebbe said that the doctor asked the Frierdiker Rebbe then, why would God strike you of all places in the two tools that you need most to communicate with your Chassidim, your mouth and your right hand? That was how the Rebbe communicated. He either spoke or he wrote. And the Rebbe said that the doctor at the time Frierdiker Rebbe did not answer. And the Rebbe went on to explain it at length. Not to explain the Eibishter, why the Eibishter does things, but it's all printed. It's printed in Sefer HaSichos Tafshin and Beis, boy. You can read it, it's Arichas. And the Rebbe basically compared it to Moshe Rabbeinu, same kasha. Moshe lo ish dvarim anechi, kvad peh v'kvad loshen, aras v'sayim. 3 different ways the Torah explains how he didn't speak clearly, or however you interpret it. So why would the Eibishter choose? Of all people, the Eibishter chose Ela dvarim asher diber Moshe, the man who would give over Dvar Hashem, who needed to speak to the people. Everything was v'yidaber Hashem al Moshe lemer, and they should say it to the people. A person who has a challenge. And Moshe Taka asked that question. Why are you sending me? Send Adam. And the Eibishter answers, Misam Pella Adam. I'm not looking for you to be a speaker. I want you to say my words, basically. I give the words into your mouth. But why would the Eibishter choose someone that had a challenge with their dibur? And the bottom line is, Chassidus answers, is Moshe was actually on a higher level than dibur. He was on a level of machshava. Alma diskasya. And machshava is so intense it can't express itself in dibur. The Rebbe brings there from the Zohar that the dibur haya begolus, because a nasi b'Yisrael, who is nasi hu hakel, if the hakel is in golus, the nasi is also in golus. And where's his biggest golus in his dibur? So the dibur haya begolus, but that doesn't mean achsaron, because Moshe obviously was on the level of machshava. And the Eibishter wanted that machshava, the pnimius of machshava, should be expressed in dibur. The Rebbe goes on to explain it. The kids, so then the end of the Sikha is the main punchline, which I wanted to focus on. The Rebbe says, and therefore, I'm paraphrasing, not exact lashon, but the teichen that when a Rebbe has a stroke, cannot speak. The Rebbe doesn't use the word stroke, obviously. When he has I guess his dibur is not functioning or whatever the word is. The Rebbe said, that each of us have to be, each of those that listen to Moshe, have to become the mouthpiece that now communicates what Moshe said. And I remember that sikha 6 weeks earlier. At the time, we didn't know why the Rebbe was saying it. It was strange, because the Rebbe rarely would suddenly start speaking for 15 minutes about stroke. And now, obviously, tragically, we understood quite well. But I took it very personally, to be honest, because I saw it mamash ha'irah to me. Ha'irah to everybody, but to me for sure, that's what I did. I was a chayzer. That's what I did, exactly what I did. I listened to the Rebbe and I chazed it and then wrote it down. I was a maniach too, I wrote it down. So to me, that was like a klarkeit. That's what you have to do now. You continue the same work, except obviously we'd love to have a new farbrengen and new words from the Rebbe. But you know what? There's plenty of work to be done to communicate. That's when I made the decision, actually, to write Toward a Meaningful Life. That was the main push. Because I said, what's the best way to be picha? Is to write a book for as many people as you can reach. I can write a book for insiders, so I can write a book for a large audience. Since I had the chush to do that, the idea came in my mind. I didn't start my mission on Beis. I started in Nundala, to be honest. It took another stroke for me to wake up, unfortunately. Chavzai Nod Nundal, we all know, was another stroke. That was 2 years to the day, which for me, that was like, enough was enough. It wasn't just, I can't explain my emotions. It was a very complicated time. Every day you hope for the better and you wanted it to get better. It's not like we came to peace that the Rebbe is not going to speak. It was a big mahala. Let's put it that way. And it was Yud Aleph Nissen Nun Dalet that I sat down and actually recorded Toward a Meaningful Life on a recording. Not mamish as it would be the final book, but the basic ideas. And it was a direct Chassidus from this sikha. There's no question in my mind. So I think back now, it's 29 years later. It's a long time since Chavzai Nodib. And, we could sit and cry about the loss and about the Rebbe's Golus, so to speak, Hadibar Begolus. And then, of course, came Gimel Tammuz 2 years and some months later. And probably some people, that's what they do. They cry about the good old days. But I can tell you as a first-hand witness, and you could see it in every sikha from the Rebbe, that's not the Rebbe's derech. We don't sit and cry. Even if you want to cry, it has to translate into something. For me, it became the major drive what I do today, everything, including teaching here. Because it was very clear to me, this is your mission. I understood it without suffix. It wasn't like I had two options, maybe I'll do something else. It was as clear as day to me. And I'm sharing it that way personally. So for me, Chavzai Nodar is that mixed element. One is obviously the Dibur Haya Begolas, like the Rebbe quotes from Zohar. But on the other hand, that means there's a job to be done. We can't just stop. That's not the first half of the sentence. The second half is what are you going to do about it? So I would say to each of you and everyone who's listening, whoever may be participating, you all are the Rebbe's picha at the end of the day. You don't have to be official chayzer or maniach to have heard the Rebbe. You're learning Chassidus, you're learning Nigla, you're learning Teira, the Moshe Rabbeinu of the Adar. And though, you didn't see the Rebbe Begashmis, and but remember the Rebbe that we saw Begashmis, his etzem was in his Teira. People mistake him when they learn the Geras HaKadosh when the Alter Rebbe says, "Ishtaki chyatim b'chayui," and why? Because the chaya of a tzaddik is chayim ruchnim, v'yira and amuna. So everyone thinks that he's talking only after the stalkos. The Rebbe's talking. The Alter Rebbe's talking before that. That a chayit tzaddik neshama beguf, even when you see a guf and he's speaking and everything, it's also chayim ruchnim. The mela, that part is not nishtanit. On the contrary, it gets stronger after this stalkos. The problem is we're makusha to the guf, unfortunately. So that's what we connect with, the image, the structure. To be honest, even though I was also connected to that, we all love the Rebbe, not just Beruchnius, also Begashmius. But at the same time, You learn a little Chassidus, you realize that Rebbe is not his Guf Gashmi, that's just his Keli. It's his neshama. And though absolutely it's not, I'm absolutely saying it's a tragedy that we don't have neshama beguf gashmi ve'enei basar shalonu. I'm saying that just for all the record for anybody that may have different ways of interpreting shalonu, right? Like I remember one Simchas Torah, a guy got drunk. He came over to me in 770. Right then, night after Gimel Tammuz, he said to me, "What means the Rebbe nicht da? Mir sei nicht da. The Rebbe is da. Mir sei nicht da." That's what he told me. We're not here. The Rebbe is here. So I said to him, I understand, but the problem is we want to be in the same world. It doesn't matter who's here. We want to be, a connection. So we want to be here too. Either way. So the point is that I'm not saying it as an achama, but the fact of the matter is, Skashas to the Rebbe is not based on Gashmis. It's based on Ruchnis. And unfortunately, if someone was mekusher only to the Guf Gashmi of the Rebbe before Gimel Tammuz, before Chav Zayin Adar, and that's gone, then what's left? But someone's mekusher to the Rebbe, as he says in Ayem Yem, and many places that his Skashas is learning the Rebbe's Torah and doing what the Rebbe wants, the Hiros, and that Skasha doesn't change Kiyur Zenish. The Rebbe's Torah does not get diminished, God forbid, nor the Hiros. On the contrary, now we have a bigger job because we have to be the picha and we have to be the arms and legs. So that to me is Chav Zayin Adar in a nutshell. What are you going to do about it? That was the Rebbe's always the question. The Rebbe never allowed anyone to ask why bad things happen or why this mystery. That's mysteries we don't know. But the Rebbe always said, so what are you going to do about it? Not why, but what? What are you going to do? So that's my few words of Divrei Seres Chav Zayin Adar. Obviously, we all pray and want the Rebbe Bekashmis, and the Rebbe should be the picha. He doesn't need us to be the speakers, but right now that's what was given to us. And there's whether we like it or not. Like the Rebbe said, Yud Shvat, Yud Aleph. It's not B'chira Seinu. Didn't choose it. We would prefer otherwise, but this is our job. So I hope you could all use Chav Zayin Adar that way. And to me, as I said, the fact that you did not experience the Rebbe speaking and then the Rebbe not speaking, doesn't matter because you're connected to the Rebbe through your life, through your learning, and through your Aveda, and through the Hiros of the Rebbe, and that's all that matters. And you have a job because the Rebbe spoke. How many people in the world know what the Rebbe stands for? You do. So that immediately is the achrayis, to be picha, to be the Rebbe's mouthpiece, the Rebbe's channel, if you wish, and shliach, shluchish lodin k'meisei. So I hope you use it well. So Chav Zayin Adar needs to be a day of Yisraelis in that level. And with that, unless somebody wants to ask me something, I'll be happy to move it right into Ayin Beis. We'll find a connection to Pshittis and Tziyut. I don't know, we can find a connection. The Rebbe does write in a letter. I may add this. You all know the famous letter to Rabbi Binyaminson. Tafresh Tzadik Tes letter from the Rebbe, the 4 different Pirushim and Tzimtzum. You're familiar with that letter? Oh, really? Okay. One day maybe we'll learn it as well inside. So I don't want to go into the whole letter. The letter is a whole arichas. He asked the Rebbe that he heard that I think he was talking about Michtav Meliel. Who is it from? Come to me the name of it. Anyway, he asked the Rebbe, is it true that all the shittas about Tzimtzum, Kipshutei, Tzimtzum, not Kipshutei, all Helchim B'derech, and they all agree? And the Rebbe said, absolutely not. They're not agreeable. And the Rebbe spells out 4 different shittas there. But then, this is Tzadik Tes. 2 years later, means the Rebbe was still in Europe when he wrote that letter. 2 years later, or maybe 3 years, Tavshin Beis, I think. It's a follow-up letter. Short letter, shorter Lefiyarach, and he writes to him, I'm sure you didn't miss the main point. That when Chassidus says Tzimtzum is not Kipshutei, it means, and this is the Rebbe writes, it's that right here with us, the Gashmis, we have Moshe Rabbeinu as he was on Har Sinai, and the Rashbi as he was in the Idra, and we have the Baal Shem Tov, the Arizal and the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe and all the Rabbeim with us right here. That's the bottom line. Tzimtzum is not Kipshutei. So since we're learning about Tzimtzum and we're learning about Eren Sotifni at Tzimtzum, Lachir at Tzimtzum,
Second letter.
You want to, huh?
The second letter is split in the Spanish?
Yeah. I think the first letter will seichen to the second one. First one is tzaddik test. The second one, I think, it may even be, I think it's it's a few years later for sure. I don't remember the Tavshin Beis, Tavshin Gimel, something like that. Yeah, they're both printed. The second one is obviously, first one is more ascholadik about the Tzimtzum, the Dargis, the different shittas. But the second one is like drives the point home. So in Inyan, what we're learning about Lifnei Tzimtzum, Acharat Tzimtzum, the moshel that we're in the middle of discussing, is really, if you want to make it practical, based on this letter of the Rebbe, you don't even have to go stretch and come up with your own ideas. That's what it comes down to. There's Elokus here, Shittas, except we don't see it. And in that case, then whatever happened, Gimel Tammuz or Chav Zayin Adar, now I'm saying it wasn't a dimyan. We're not saying it was an illusion. It happened just like the Tzimtzum Arishan happened. Tzimtzum is not, even the shit that Tzimtzum not Kipshuti doesn't say that Tzimtzum is a dimyan. It says it's just not literal. It's not a literal siluk. It's a helam. But it is a helam. A helam and a helam is a mitzvah, says the Rebbe explains a number of places. Tzimtzum nikra kelim, etc. But at the same time, from a certain perspective, there's no real tzimtzum. Because from that side of the curtain, so to speak, the Eibishter's side, the tzimtzum doesn't have any impact. It's only from our side. However, of course, the Eibishter rechens sich also with our side of the picture. So many ways when we're learning about these dargis, if you really apply it to our personal lives, it's about the connection to Elokus. And Elokus, of course, in the tzir of a Rebbe, Elokus, which is an Neshama Vatsilis, an Neshama Klolis, Ishalikim. So whatever affects Elokus affects the Rebbe as well. And I might as well share the story. Maybe I've told it before. It's also very relevant. Rabbi Paratcher. So after the Tzemach Tzedek's Rebbetzin Stalik and Tafresh Chof Aleph, she passed away. Was it Chof Aleph? Maybe earlier. It was 5 years before the Rebbe. Yeah, so it'd be Chof Aleph. So the Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek, which same name and same Rebbetzин's names, were the only ones where the Rebbetzin was nostalgic before the Rebbe. All the others was the other way around. So everybody, we know that the Tzemach Tzedek went into a state of, you could say, helam, if you wish, lack of a better word. No Maimorim, there was no Yechidus, and the Chassidim were a very big tsar from it. So similar to what happened in Memches, not maybe quite the same level, but there's a big similarities, and we all saw it. And the Chassidim, there's even a letter from the Rebbe about that too. The Chassidim came to the Rebbe, to Tzedek, and said, "We need you. You can't just." So he said, "Ein melech b'lei matrenisa." There's no king without a queen. So they said, of course, the Chassidim were smart enough to bring a posted that the Torah is the Malka. But some Tzedek did not accept that. And but it was a tkufa like this. I don't know how long it lasted. I don't know if it's written up how long. But then the news came that some Tzedek didn't say Maimer Chassidus. So we can imagine a Simcha Gdel after all this. So everybody came to Lubavitch. Everybody who could come, Chassidim. Rabbi Paratcher was, of course, by him and Maimer was like the Yikar Shebi Yikar. So he came. He wasn't well already because he was older. He would also be nostalgic, I think. Yud Aleph of that year, maybe Chav Aleph or Chav Beis. That Kufa or Chav Dalet maybe. No, Chav Dalet. It's written up, yeah. But he was already older man then. It wasn't easy, but he came. They're waiting for the Tzemach Tzedek to come out to say the Maimer. They waited a half hour, an hour, and nothing. He couldn't stand anymore because he was not well, so he was going out. On his way out of the cheder, wherever they were waiting, he hears two young lights speaking. And they were speaking in a way that bothered the Rab Hill. They were speaking in a grobe, lefierach, not a edel way about the Rebbe. Whether they said the Rebbe is in a state of yush or atzvus, I'm not sure what language it was, but it was not what you say. So suddenly he had a ruach chaim. He got all it was daf zu sein, Chassidish surge of energy, and he came over to the two young light. This is exactly how I heard it from Rab Shmuel, by Fabrengen. And he said, the Tzemach Tzedek said, the Rabbi Hillel said to them, Shvenzelach, Shvenzelach, Shvenzelach. You know what that means? You'll translate it already. Everyone can translate what a shvanz is. You can use more grubba language, less grubba, but it's definitely not a compliment. He says, Shvenzelach, Shvenzelach, Shvenzelach. What's meant it? A Rebbe is eigen anoz unamoil. Nein, a Rebbe is a lekus. B'shas da helam of a lekus, da helam of a Rebbe. You all understood? Do I have to translate? Huh? I'll translate since we're being broadcast to the globe. Who knows? He says, what do you think? He's called them, he says, what do you, like, you're idiots. What do you think the Rebbe is a nose, eyes, nose, and a mouth? A Rebbe is godliness. And when there's a concealment on godliness, there's a concealment on the Rebbe. I remember hearing this story, but it really impacted me a lot after Chav Zayin Adar and Gimel Tammuz. Because I don't want to say this, but a lot of people speak sometimes a language you shouldn't be speaking about the Rebbe in their own way. Maybe they don't mean it. But Rabbi Hillel's words, alakus, yes, da helam of alakus. No, that we know. Golus is a helam, shchinta begalusa. It's a lashon chazal. It's not our own aces. So that you could say. But it's a whole different take. It's not humanizing. And I say it because, going back to Chav Zayin Adar, I was connecting it somewhat to what we're learning, that when you learn this sugya of Tzimtzum, and Lifnat Tzimtzum, Achnat Tzimtzum, that even Achnat Tzimtzum, with all the helam, there's still something that remains. Like here we learned last week the moshel of the beis from Baruch. So that even though you don't have the word, the beis is there. And the beis has a reshim, an impact from what was there. And it's part of Baruch, except we don't see it right now. The child or whoever is the beginner. So the fact that we don't see something doesn't mean it's not real. It just means that you need to grow and expand your consciousness and expand your mind. So I just thought that the Rebbe's letter about Tzimtzum Kipshute, it just fits very well. And again, I'm not trying to make things that is beautiful, but this is what we like. We wish, and Chav Zayin Adar is a bracha. I'm just saying that the fact, after the fact, we learn from Chassidus and we learn from these stories that it's not all lost, let's put it that way. And on the contrary, what do you need more? The Rebbe said, Chav Ches Nissen, which is going to be 30 years now, Chav Ches Nissen Nun Aleph, I did everything. Tut was ihr kennt. Was noch kann ich tun? Eins gesagt, kann ich eigentlich beginnen, tut was ihr kennt. So that's exactly in different words. Be the Rebbe's picha, and be the Rebbe's mouthpiece, and be the Rebbe's arms and legs. And that's our job now. And that is the main focus. So any of the negative, if any there is negative, it should be channeled to that. That's, so I give a little addendum in addition. That connects it a bit. Does anybody want to ask me something? I mean, I'm happy to talk about this. We don't have to go into Ayin Beis, but I just thought since it's Chav Zayin Adar, Yonah Diyema, and I was going to do it anyway, by the way, and that I give you credit. But so that's what I renew my contract. I renew my commitment to Chav Zayin Adar, to the Rebbe, and to the Rebbe's cause, and I hope you all do the same in your own way. And
you started off the beginning of today's shir about that for those that were born after Chav Zayin Adar, perhaps it's a little bit distant or familiar or so on. To be able to spread the Rebbe's Torah and to have the same passion of.
Well, as I also said, that's why I spoke about Iskashus was always meant to be Iskashus to the Rebbe's Torah and the Rebbe's Heiros. The only thing is, it was easier for us because we also had a physical Rebbe, so to speak, in a Guf Gashmi that we could see. But in Indian, my connection is completely in the Rebbe's Inyanim, not the Rebbe's Gashmis. So yes, there's always a part in every human being you want the Kesha Gashmi. But today, what I see, and it's hard for me to put myself in your shoes, but I do see. Yes, many people have challenges. I'm not denying that. But I can tell you many people had challenges before Gimel Tammuz and Chav Zayin Adar too. Rest assured. Just because everything was begoli doesn't mean people didn't have bchira. And I always tell Bochum and the guys, I say there was a good Nefesh Habamis we had before Chav Zayin Adar. Everybody thinks there was no Nefesh Habamis and no Yitzhahara. Can you believe it? There was. From Chet Eitzadas it began. And unfortunately, sometimes you take for granted. You can't take it for granted because So I see today a certain level of iskashus. I mean, this has been said so many times, it's a cliche. And I'm sure you heard it by all the Fabrengens that you have the etzem of the Rebbe and we are on the Giluyim, And so I don't want to sound like another tape recorder, but there's a truth to today, the challenge, for me too, for all of us. You have to dig deeper. The connection can only be to the etzem of the Rebbe now, which means the Rebbe's Teira and Heiras. And how you do that, to me, it comes down to learning Chassidus properly and understanding the Rebbe, understanding what the Rebbe stands for. Because when you appreciate that what the Rebbe stands for continues to live in every possible way. And then you feel the responsibility to do something with it. If a person doesn't have that, honestly, it's going to be makif. I know there are people who don't have that today, but they yell Rebbe, 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 or Yechi, whatever. And to me, it's Chitzenius. Is Chitzenius worthless? We know Chitzenius has something, but I can't see it sustainable. How could you be passionate? How long can you be passionate with Chitzenius? So to me, the only way is that you appreciate it, your being, which is the whole Yisrael. The question you have to ask yourself, you're now Unkel, you're no longer Bochum. You have to ask yourself, what are you going to do with your life now? It's something I spoke about when I first started teaching here. What are you committed to? Now, I know many people are committed to the Rebbe because that's the culture you grew up. It's a pasnish not to, But is that enough? Is it deeper or not? So I would like to believe that you guys learned enough and are inspired enough to have connected to the Rebbe in some way. But you have to tell me if it's otherwise. And I'm not, by the way, negating your question. Your question is very legitimate. Everybody has that question. But I can tell you, I have chavedim. I have people who saw that Rebbe were living in the best of times together with all of us and still have lost their connection in many ways. I don't mean the Chitzen. The Rebbe's picture is still hanging on the wall and they tell their children Rebbe stories and they sing the Rebbe's Negurim, But I don't see necessarily that. I'm not criticizing that because they didn't maintain it. It was hard. The fire has to be fueled. Chassidus talks that the Amunah is nice, but it remains makif and it could dissipate. You can just have it and it doesn't permeate you. So my the challenge you have is, how pnimius is the Rebbe in your life? What does the Rebbe stand for? Now, this may sound a little sacrilegious. Some people don't like to hear this. The fact is there are people sometimes need a figurehead. So their connection to the Rebbe is more like a cult figure. He's my hero, and so on. Obviously, that's not what Chassidus demands, but I understand Lubavitch and Chabad attracts all people. You attract also Chitzenim, and you attract people who just like the Rebbe, they like his blue eyes. And some people like the Rebbe's energy, or they like this. And I'm not denying that the Rebbe is a Kel Hakel. So he's also something for someone who needs that, fine. Like, there are people who needed Kiruvim from the Rebbe. We always knew the real Chasidim didn't need a Kiruv because the connection was much deeper than that. I can assure you that if some people got Setlach like I got from the Rebbe, they would never come around again because they would feel insulted. I felt it always like a chesed. You have to be mature with the Rebbe. It all comes down to your relationship. So I would say, if you're Fabrench of Zainod, that has to be the question. What's your relationship? And based on that, because I don't know if we have to go through, you have to imagine the Rebbe speaking, and then Zainod the Rebbe not speaking, and then I don't think that's so Magushim. But the Inyan is right now, the question is now that the Rebbe is not speaking Begashmis Begoli, but he continues to speak through his letters and through his Fabrengens and through the Siches and the Mamorim and the Heros and so on. What does it mean to you? And that, when you answer that question, you'll know where you're at. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder. I'm sharing with you my life. I made my commitment. Do I have silence? Of course, I have bigger questions probably than you have. I just don't let them affect me. There's questions. We all have questions. I'm a pretty big skeptic. I'm not a guy that just is a Kabbalah salesman. But I also see both sides, and you have to make a choice. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have questions. Questions, what are you going to do? If the questions paralyze you, you end up doing nothing because you don't know what to do, then it's not a good thing. If the questions motivate you, yeah. I can tell you that without suffering in my mind, that the Rebbe and his cause, so to speak, the Benkel, as I mentioned last time, it's not just the Rebbe, the Yochid, the Rebbe representing Chabad, Chassidus, Teira, Moshe Rabbeinu of a generation, the cause is worthy enough to commit your life to. And on a deeper level, maybe that's why your neshama came down here in the first place. If you feel that, you'll be fine whether you're born after Gimel Tammuz or not. If you don't, you have to work on it. I really don't have a quick answer and fix for that. And that's a real soul searching. It comes down to the same question I mentioned before. A lot of us, I grew up in this community. I grew up here, I went to the yeshivas, I was brainwashed like everybody was, I don't mean that necessarily negatively, because I didn't feel anything bad about it. But like everybody, a child, you're taught from the youngest age certain things. No one asks you what you feel. And they shouldn't ask you what you feel. Children have to be told what to do. But then when you become an adult, you start asking yourself, and I did, do I want to be here, or did I just grow up here? And unfortunately, there are a lot of people that just continue being cultural Chabadniks, let's put it that way. That's the culture. Had they grown up Chves and Bells, they would have been cultural Bells maybe, or cultural the Havdil Christians or Muslims, not to be too chutzpahdik, but that's, human beings are conformists. But I think Chassidus want more for them. So Chassidus wants us to look inside ourselves and also take what you learned and take a nasa kedin l'nishma, hagdomis nasa l'nishma, but then comes a nishma. We all know it's not enough just amunah. You have to bring it into aprimis. I'm not saying anything you haven't heard, but the question is whether you personalize that. That's the shayla. That's the whole issue here. We're learning Ayin Beis, we're learning other Chassidus. To me, it's all about, is elikus something that can be mamoshistik, something that you can relate to be'efem mukhshi. If it is, that's the goal. Then, if you can understand elikus in your life, there's no issue with the Rebbe after Gimel Tammuz, because the Rebbe is an extension of elikus. And I say elikus, not elikat, just for the record, in case anybody's... Elikus means like what we say, Ovis Hen Markovim, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Alter Rebbe is a dugma shalamayla. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's, to me, that's the shayla here, Yeah, so today when you're committed, definitely have to appreciate what it is. It was very easy to come running to the Rebbe's Mincha Ma'ariv every day and Shabbos and Simchas Torah. What did it take? The party going on in 770. The Rebbe was leading the whole thing. You don't have to do anything. All you got to do is jump and sing. So Mamish no Avedi. So of course, that was the easy part. Aveda is always hard. That's how it is. When it comes to your own personal thing, it's a different picture, right? Okay, so we have the Beis of Baruch, or the Reish, the Vav of Chaf, after Chav Zayin Adar and Gimel Tammuz, and now we got to connect it back to the word. How it is Lifnei Tzimtzum. That's our mission, our job. Okay. So should we talk about the second mashal? Or that'll be somewhat of an anticlimactic, already on a high, like it continue with the Chav Zayin Adar he said. It's up to you, whatever you guys like. I told you, I might as well share another story, since we're already, you like to learn, right? Okay, both. It's all the same thing. It's one hemshech. I told you the story about this Bocher, not a Lubavitcher Bocher. A Veltischer guy brought the Rebbe, it was, I think, Tov Shalom Tes maybe. He brought the Rebbe a bichel. I think he found it in Russia, or someone gave it to him, of a manuscript of, I think it's Tzemach Tzedek maybe. Oh no, I think it was maybe the Frierdiker Rebbe even. Ksav Yad. And he gave it to the Rebbe after Mincha by Gan Eden Atachten. And the Rebbe said to him, since you brought me something so precious to me, by the Rebbe, Ksav Yad, a bichel was always a very, like Pidyon Shvuyim. So since you brought something to me, let me give you something that's precious to you. So the Rebbe said to him, what would you like? So he was an American boy. So he said, I like a picture of the Rebbe with the Rebbe's autograph. That's what you do, right? Like baseball players or others, you put up a picture, and if you have their chesima, gewaltig. So the Rebbe smiled and said to him, why do you want that? He says, because then I have a connection with you. It's a very valuable thing. So the Rebbe said, if you want a connection with me, you should learn what I learn and do what I do. You go across the street to Merkis, to the Sforim store, where it was then, it was on Eastern Parkway also, I think it was there. And the Rebbe said, then take any Sforim you like, this is a matana to you. So there you have the whole story, right? And that story itself tells you the whole picture. But obviously it's easier the picture part than the signature. And the premise is a little more difficult, but that's the kavanah. When you learn Chassidus, like we're learning, the key is that it should be alive, just to come alive. I can't stand it. I remember when I was a bachur, it made me crazy. Now I realize why. It was all so technical. We learned mechanical, this detail, that detail. So now when I teach Ayim Beis, whether here or the class I give every day, and people start asking me, where exactly is this darga lifnei atzim? Like they want to have the map, like GPS, like Waze. So we want to figure out where's the tzimtzum and where's this. And then the tendency is to try to make it very physical, but the truth is it's right here in you. When you understand that, and you can find it in you, that everything changes. Because then it's about you. It's about you and your shlichus b'chaim and your connection. To me, that was what the Rebbe did and does in the most powerful way. The Rebbe didn't just speak in Yoni Teda. Yeah, there was Lumdus and Ge'enus and Askola and Aveda, whatever you need. But it was ultimately came down to about you. I remember, share another personal anecdote. People ask me sometimes, like, what is it when you began to appreciate the Rebbe to some extent on your level? So I remember Lamed Hey, I was 18 years old, and the Rebbe was Shvuos Lamed Hey. And the Rebbe was speaking about Kama Yesa Ika B'Shuk, Ilav Hayog Yemik De Kagorim, Kama Yesa Ika B'Shuk. Famous sugya about Matan Torah. That Rabbi Yesi said, if it was not for that day of Matan Torah, Kama Yesi Ika B'Shuk. How many Yesis would be in the shuk, in the street? But if Matan Torah made me unique, basically. It took me out of the shuk and turned me into Chefza Shel Dusha, as the Rebbe explained by Riches. That's a sichus already printed in Chelik Tazayin and other places. But I'll tell you what I remember. Besides the Havonas HaSicha, which was a very brilliant and powerful, I remember feeling that the Rebbe when he was describing that before Matan Torah, we know the Gzeira, El Yenim Le'Yord Lamata, Tachtenim Le'Yal Lamayla, and that's why he couldn't make from Gashmis a Chefza Shel Dusha. It was only Ruchnius. The only exception was a Bris, Avram Avinu. That's why he says Tisimna Yotcha Tachas Yirechi, because that was the only Chefza Shel Dusha. Everything else was Ruchnis. Matan Torah changed. El Yenim Rod Lamata, Tachtenim El Lamayla, Yal Lamayla, and now you could take. And I remember when the Rebbe described it. I remember it like today. They take a Gashmis they could think, and the Gashim itself becomes a Ruchni, a Gashmi, a mitzvah, Chefza Shel Kedusha, Tashmisha mitzvah, Tashmisha Kedusha, a mitzvah itself. I remember when the Rebbe described it, and he said, because it has a Chayes Eliki, it had a Chayes Eliki before Matan Torah too, except it wasn't Begoli. And you couldn't be Megalit in the Geshem. You can be Megalit in the Ruach, the Gavra, but not in the Chefza. But Matan Torah, you can now be Megalit in the Chefza. And then it changes forever. Remember the Rebbe says, in the Elam Vod, this thing is forever changed. It's no longer Chayel, it's Kedesh. When the Rebbe said it, and this may sound a little strange to you, I mamish felt that that the Rebbe actually sees it. He actually sees that when you take a table and you learn Torah on it, the table changes. We don't see it. And I felt like the Rebbe was sharing with us something that, sometimes someone's standing and sharing with you a beautiful scene. You don't see the scene, but he's describing it to you. So the Rebbe was like sitting on one side of the curtain, seeing reality and emes that we didn't see, and then he's just sharing it with us. I mamish felt that. Now, it could be I was 18 years old, I was impressionable. You can give me all kinds of scientific explanations why I was affected by it. But I was affected because I felt the emes of it. Again, I didn't see it, but I almost saw it because the Rebbe saw it. And from then on, every Farbrengen, I started looking for that. that how the Rebbe is saying is not just a vort, a beer in the Medrash, a beer in Chazal, in the Gemara, but it was actually giving us a taste and a feeling of Elikus and how Elikus affects our lives. And till this day, this is how I learn Sichos and Maimorim. I always look for that. Sometimes you feel it faster, sometimes you don't. It's still, you'll ask me, so why don't you daven 7 hours every day? It didn't permeate that much, I still got work to do. But at least I got one step further. So that's to me the way you live with the Rebbe. And when you have that, then it becomes personal. It's not just, okay, the Rebbe is gone, Elam and the Rebbe and all the things we believe in the Rebbe, but then it's personal. So that to me is the great challenge. And when you learn Ayin Beis, I didn't meet the Rebbe Rashab, and yet I love learning Ayin Beis because by me it's like the Rebbe. The Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe is one thing. The Rebbe Rashab was the Deir HaChamishi, and the Rebbe Deir HaShvi. But it's one hemshech. It's all Chassidus. When you learn these ideas, and then you look at the Rebbe's words, it's the same ideas. Come on, and the Rebbe adds things and so on. Everyone has their diuk, but that's already the pratim. So, okay. I'm going to learn more. We covered this. So use the day well. And what should I say? Comes to your Aleph Nissen. 120 years, right? Beginning of 120 years. We go by the Haschola. It's the Rebbetzin was turned 120. The Rebbe is going to turn 119, 120. Maybe. Okay, well, the years roll on. But you and I are here, so we have a job to do. Do it well. Kol Tov, everybody. Okay, that was the title.
5-11.